The urban downpour descended like a hushed verdict, scrubbing the city's grime but intensifying the late autumn chill. Ethan Thorne, the titan behind Thor Industries, tugged his worn cap lower, burrowing into the oversized, stained coat. The cold gnawed at his bones, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled areas he typically occupied. For 2 days he'd dwelled on these streets, a self-imposed banishment from his dominion, a drastic undertaking to grasp the raw, unvarnished truth of human character. He wasn't after sympathy. He sought a beacon, a flicker of authentic warmth in a world he increasingly suspected was fueled solely by self-interest. His quest, to unearth the ideal individual for a crucial leadership role in his nascent charitable endeavor. A position demanding more than sharp intellect, it required a genuine soul, and he believed the streets would unveil what no boardroom ever could. Most pedestrians hurried by, a blur of costly umbrellas and averted gazes. Some flicked spare change into his grimy cup without a second glance, a perfunctory act of benevolence. Others scowled, clutching their bags tighter. He witnessed disdain, apprehension, apathy, but no connection, no true acknowledgement of a fellow human. His cynicism, meticulously cultivated over years of ruthless commerce, felt vindicated. Then a vibrant yellow splash punctuated the sidewalk's gray monotony. A young woman, her bright slicker a defiant burst of color against the drab backdrop, paused near his makeshift refuge beneath a bus stop canopy. Her movements were fluid, not rushed. Her eyes scanned the street with a weary yet focused intensity. Ara Vance. Her name, he'd later discover, held the quiet fortitude he instinctively sensed from her. No designer satchel for her. A well-worn canvas tote, slightly damp, swung from her shoulder. Dark strands escaping her raincoat's hood framed a face that was fatigued, perhaps even a touch disheartened, yet held an undeniable spark in her wide brown eyes. She hadn't looked directly at him initially, her gaze fixed on the horizon, awaiting a bus. But as the rain strengthened, she shifted, and her eyes, soft and curious, landed on him. There was no immediate recoil, no judgment, just a flicker of something he hadn't encountered in days: concern. Most striking was how she didn't avert her gaze but held it for a fraction longer than anyone else. It was an affirmation, a silent query. He tensed instinctively, bracing for the usual dismissive gesture or the quick, embarrassed glance away. But Ara did something different. She reached into her tote, retrieving a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in a napkin and a small, sealed bottle of water. She approached him slowly, her steps gentle, not hesitant. She offered no platitude, no sermon. She simply knelt, rain beading on her bright yellow hood, and extended the provisions. "Hey," she murmured, her voice soft, slightly hoarse from the cold but incredibly kind. "It's not much, but I hope this helps. It's still good." Ethan, disarmed by her directness and genuine warmth, found himself speechless for a moment. He hadn't anticipated this. No one had knelt. No one had spoken to him as if he were simply human. He accepted the sandwich and water, his fingers, rough from days without proper care, brushing hers. Her skin was surprisingly warm, soft. A small, almost imperceptible current flowed between them, a fleeting bond in the cold, wet world. "Thank you," he managed, his voice deeper and rougher than intended, deliberately altered for his disguise. He watched her rise, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as if his simple gratitude had embarrassed her. She didn't linger for praise or recognition. She offered a small, shy smile, a genuine curve of her lips that illuminated her weary face. "Stay warm," she whispered, then turned and hurried away as her bus finally arrived, its headlights slicing through the gloom. Ethan watched her depart, the vibrant yellow vanishing into the urban tapestry. He was left with a half-eaten sandwich and a profound sense of bewilderment. His experiment had yielded its first unforeseen outcome. The warmth of the sandwich in his hand paled in comparison to the warmth that had just settled, unbidden, in his chest. He felt an undeniable pull, a curiosity about this one girl who had dared to see past the grime and the rags. His mission suddenly felt less like a test and more like a pursuit. He had to know more about Vance. Ara Vance hastened home, the rain's chill permeating her worn coat, yet an unusual warmth lingered in her chest. She'd spent her meager bus fare on coffee and a pastry, her sole indulgence after another grueling double shift at the downtown cafe. Giving away her sandwich had been an impulse, a quiet, almost automatic response to the obvious need she saw in the man under the bus stop. It was a small act, but one that felt right, a tiny ripple of kindness in a world that often felt overwhelmingly cold and unyielding. Her world was a constant tightrope walk. Every dollar was meticulously accounted for, every hour of sleep a luxury. Her parents had always instilled in her the values of diligence and empathy, but they'd also been plagued by financial struggles that had shadowed Ara's childhood. Her mother, a fiercely proud woman, had succumbed to a long, expensive illness just a year ago, leaving Ara with a mountain of medical debt and the quiet, heavy responsibility of caring for her younger sister, Nia, still in high school. Nia was bright, ambitious, and Ara was determined to give her the opportunities they had both only dreamed of. This was the pressure that shaped Ara's days, the silent weight that often pulled her gaze away from the mundane and into a future she was desperate to build. She worked two jobs, the bustling cafe in the mornings and a quiet, unassuming library in the evenings. Her dreams, once vibrant and artistic, had been neatly folded away, replaced by the practical pursuit of stability. She longed to study graphic design to create something beautiful, but tuition felt like an insurmountable peak. Each day was a grind, a testament to her resilience, a quiet battle against despair. Days bled into weeks. Ethan, still in his disguise, found himself returning to the same bus stop, hopping to glimpse the yellow raincoat. He learned her routine. She always took the same bus, always had a quick, kind word for the driver, always offered a genuine smile, even when her eyes seemed to carry the world's weight. He observed her interactions with others. She was patient with a confused elderly woman, offered directions to a lost tourist, picked up a child's dropped mitten with a gentle hand. She embodied the quiet, unassuming goodness he had almost given up finding. Their encounters became a quiet ritual. He would be there, a silent fixture, and she would occasionally approach, offering a small coffee from her cafe shift, a piece of fruit, or just a brief, warm good morning or stay safe. Their conversations were brief, almost whispered exchanges, yet they forged a unique intimacy. He learned about her sister, Nia, about her dreams of college, about the library where she worked, about her love for old books. He offered her quiet advice disguised as wisdom of the streets, and found himself captivated by her spirit, her unwavering hope despite her clear struggles. He even learned about her secret artistic aspirations, the sketches she made in her spare moments, seeing a talent that belied her humble circumstances. Ara, for her part, found herself surprisingly drawn to the quiet, dignified homeless man. He wasn't like the others she encountered. He spoke with an unexpected depth. His eyes, though often downcast, held a surprising intelligence, a knowing gaze that sometimes felt far too intense for his ragged exterior. She noticed little things. His hands, though rough, were surprisingly clean, his nails neatly trimmed. The way he sometimes used words that seemed too eloquent for someone living on the streets. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard. There was a subtle scent of expensive aftershave that sometimes lingered, even through the smell of damp wool and exhaust fumes. It was a fleeting scent, a memory she couldn't quite place, a premonition that something about him was off. One afternoon, as she handed him a hot chocolate, he subtly adjusted his beanie, and for a split second the low afternoon sun caught the glint of a high-end watch, quickly hidden beneath his sleeve. Ara's brow furrowed. It was a flicker of something entirely out of place. She dismissed it as a trick of the light, a momentary hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the image lingered, a discordant note in the otherwise consistent symphony of his carefully constructed persona. The quiet dignity, the intelligent eyes, the sophisticated vocabulary, and now a glimpse of something expensive hidden beneath the grime. A strange coincidence or a sign that the man she was befriending, the homeless man she had grown to care for, was concealing a profound truth. The premonition hung in the air, a whisper of something unseen and vast just beyond her grasp. The email arrived like a beacon of hope in Ara's overflowing inbox, an interview invitation from Thor Industries. It was for an administrative assistant role in their new philanthropic division, a role that promised stability, a respectable salary and benefits that felt like a lifeline. She had applied weeks ago, almost on a whim, never truly expecting a response from such a prestigious company. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was the chance to finally put Nia through college, to pay off her mother's medical debts, to breathe freely for the first time in years. She spent days preparing, poring over Thor Industries' website, practicing interview questions, even buying a new, modest but professional dress from a thrift store. She told herself this was her moment, a chance to step out of the shadows of her past and into a brighter future. She even shared the exciting news with Ethan, the homeless man, during their usual morning encounter. He listened intently, his eyes holding a depth she couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of something she thought might be pride, or perhaps a trace of regret. He wished her luck, his voice a low, encouraging rumble. "You deserve every good thing, Ara," he had said, and his words had filled her with a strange, soaring confidence. The day of the interview dawned crisp and clear. Ara arrived at the gleaming Thor Industries skyscraper, her palms sweating, her heart a drum against her ribs. The lobby was a symphony of polished marble and hushed efficiency. A receptionist directed her to the 30th floor, the executive offices. Her excitement was tinged with nervous anticipation. She walked into the spacious waiting area, exquisitely decorated with modern art and plush seating. There were two other candidates, both impeccably dressed, radiating an air of polished confidence that made Ara feel suddenly small in her thrift store dress. A few minutes later, a confident, impeccably dressed woman emerged from an inner office. "Ara Vance," she asked, her voice professional, "the CEO will see you now." CEO? Ara's brows furrowed. She thought she was interviewing with a departmental head. This was unexpected, intimidating. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the open door. Her heart stopped. Seated behind a massive, sleek desk bathed in the natural light streaming from a floor-to-ceiling window was the man from the bus stop. Not the ragged, bearded figure in the threadbare coat, but a man in a tailor-made suit, his dark hair neatly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, his eyes, those same intelligent, penetrating eyes, now holding a look of regret, expectation. It was Ethan, her Ethan, the homeless man. Ara felt the blood drain from her face, then rush back in a furious, humiliating blush. The room spun. The carefully constructed mask of his disguise had vanished, revealing the truth with a brutal, blinding clarity. He was no homeless man. He was Ethan Thorne, the CEO, the man whose company she was now in, desperately seeking a job, the man she had offered half-eaten sandwiches and small kindnesses to. The man who had listened to her pour out her heart, her struggles, her dreams, all under a guise of vulnerability. "Ethan," she whispered, the name catching in her throat, raw with disbelief and betrayal. He rose slowly from his chair, his expression unreadable, a complex mix of apology and apprehension. "Ara," he said, his voice now the rich, resonant tone she had heard before but stripped of its forced roughness. "Please sit down." But Ara couldn't sit. Her legs felt like jelly, her mind racing, scrambling to connect the disparate pieces of this cruel puzzle, the expensive watch, the eloquent words, the knowing gaze. It had all been a lie. Every shared coffee, every quiet conversation, every moment of genuine connection she had felt had been a performance. He hadn't been a man in need. He had been a man conducting an elaborate, humiliating test. You lied to me," she choked out, her voice rising, thick with betrayal. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of furious, burning humiliation. "You pretended to be. You let me pour out my heart. You took my money, my food, my kindness, all for a sick game. Is this how you interview people, Mr. Thorne? By playing a cruel trick?" Ethan stepped around his desk, moving toward her, his hand outstretched. "Ara, no, it wasn't a game. It was a test, yes, but not in the way you think. I was looking for true character, for genuine compassion, for someone who could see beyond the surface. And you were the only one. The only one you could humiliate, she retorted, her voice breaking. The realization of her vulnerability, of how much she had shared with him, believing him to be someone else, was overwhelming. You saw me at my lowest, struggling, and you used it. You saw my hope for this job, and you let me walk in here like a fool. Her chest heaved with a mixture of anger and profound hurt. The dream, the lifeline, had just turned into a bitter mockery. How could she ever trust anyone again? How could she sit here and pretend to interview for a job with a man who had so thoroughly, so cruelly deceived her? The betrayal cut deeper than any financial struggle, deeper than any past heartbreak. It was a knife twisted into the very core of her compassionate nature. She felt used, ridiculed, and utterly, irrevocably broken. "Get out," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door, her voice raw with a pain that echoed through the polished office. "I don't want your job. I don't want anything from you." And with a final, desperate sob, Ara turned and fled from the office, leaving Ethan Thorne, the powerful CEO, standing alone amidst the wreckage of his elaborate plan, the weight of her betrayal a crushing burden in the suddenly silent room. Ara bolted from the skyscraper, as if the very air inside was poisoned. She didn't stop until she was blocks away, leaning against the cold stone of a forgotten monument, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the last vestiges of her crushed dignity. The humiliation was a raw wound, searing her from the inside out. Every kind word she had offered, every shared moment of vulnerability, every small comfort she had given him now felt like a grotesque joke at her expense. He had seen her at her most open, her most hopeful, and he had used it all as part of a calculating charade. The dream of the job, the lifeline for Nia, the hope of finally escaping the shadow of debt, it had all been dangled before her, only to be cruelly snatched away by the man who had pretended to be her confidant. She avoided the bus stop, walking miles out of her way, even on the coldest days. The thought of seeing him, even in his CEO guise, was unbearable. Her trust, always a fragile commodity, had been shattered. The innate kindness that was so central to her being now felt like a weakness, a vulnerability that had been exploited. She lost her appetite. Her sleep became a patchwork of restless hours, and the quiet determination that had fueled her dwindled to a weary resignation. Nia noticed, her bright young eyes filled with concern, but Ara simply mumbled about the stress of job hunting. How could she explain that the man she had helped, the man who had seen her genuine heart, had turned out to be the very person who then broke it? Ethan, meanwhile, was consumed by a regret so profound it threatened to unravel his carefully constructed world. Ara's heartbroken scream, her furious tears echoed in his ears constantly. He had found his true character, his genuine compassion. But at what cost? He had destroyed the very thing he sought to reward. His meticulously planned philanthropic venture, designed to uplift those with hidden potential, now felt like a hypocritical facade. He canceled all interviews, unable to face another candidate, knowing he had alienated the one person who truly embodied the values he preached. He tried to reach her. He called her phone incessantly, leaving desperate, rambling voicemails filled with apologies and explanations, none of which she returned. He even went to the cafe where she worked, hoping to catch her, but she had shifted her hours, avoiding him. He left a note at the library detailing his remorse, acknowledging his terrible mistake, begging for a chance to explain. The note remained untouched. His desperation grew. He realized that no amount of money, no position of power, could fix the damage he had done to Ara's trust. He couldn't buy forgiveness. He had to earn it. And he had to prove that his intentions, however misguided his method, had been genuine. He thought about Ara's dream of graphic design, the small sketches she carried in her tote bag, the quiet passion in her voice when she spoke of art. He initiated a series of subtle yet significant changes at Thor Industries. He launched a new program focusing on outreach and mentorship for underprivileged aspiring artists, providing scholarships and resources, something that directly aligned with Ara's aspirations. He started spending less time in his penthouse office and more time in the community, volunteering at local shelters, supporting genuine grassroots initiatives, trying to rebuild his own sense of connection and purpose. He didn't announce these changes with fanfare. He did them quietly, humbly, hoping that perhaps somehow Ara might hear, might see, might understand the sincerity behind his remorse. Weeks later, a small art exhibition was held at a local community center, showcasing the work of emerging local artists. Ara, hesitant but encouraged by Nia, had submitted a piece, a vibrant, melancholic cityscape, capturing the beauty and loneliness of urban life. On the opening night, as she stood nervously beside her work, a shadow fell over her. She looked up, and there he was, Ethan. No longer in his CEO attire, but in simple, understated clothes, his eyes holding a familiar vulnerability she recognized from their days on the street. Her first instinct was to flee, but something in his gaze, a raw honesty she hadn't seen before, made her pause. He looked tired, worn, and utterly remorseful. He wasn't there for a grand gesture, no public apology, just a quiet, respectful presence. He stood before her artwork, his eyes tracing the lines, a silent appreciation on his face. "It's beautiful, Ara," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper filled with genuine awe. "Just like you said, you capture so much feeling." Ara's anger, though still present, was momentarily eclipsed by the unexpected sincerity in his voice, the quiet humility in his posture. He wasn't the powerful CEO here. He was just Ethan, the man who had once knelt in the rain. This was the beginning of their emotional comeback, not with a sudden reunion, but with a tentative step toward understanding, a fragile thread of hope emerging from the deep chasm of betrayal. The art exhibit became the quiet turning point. Ara didn't forgive him immediately, but she agreed to talk. They met in a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop, a neutral ground far removed from both his opulent office and the harsh reality of the streets. Their conversations were long, painful, and raw. She confronted him with her hurt, her anger, the profound sense of betrayal. He listened patiently, humbly, offering no excuses, only genuine apologies and explanations of his flawed, desperate search for authenticity. He revealed the extent of his disillusionment with the corporate world, how he had seen too many people driven by greed and superficiality, how he had started to doubt if genuine character even existed in the high-stakes world he inhabited. He admitted his method was misguided, cruel even, but swore his intentions were to find someone truly good, someone he could trust implicitly with his philanthropic vision. He spoke of the increasing emptiness he felt despite his wealth, and how her simple acts of kindness had been a revelation, a stark contrast to the transactional nature of his usual interactions. As Ara listened, she began to see past the CEO and the disguise to the man beneath, a man who, despite his immense power, was grappling with his own form of isolation and a desperate need for genuine connection. He confessed that the days on the street, especially his interactions with her, had forced him to confront his own humanity, his own vulnerabilities. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, truly heard, without the filter of his wealth or status. It was a slow, arduous process of rebuilding. He offered her the administrative assistant role again, but this time he explained that her duties would evolve, allowing her to leverage her artistic talents in the company's new community initiatives. He even offered to fund her graphic design studies, not as an apology, but as an investment in her talent, genuinely believing in her potential. Ara cautiously accepted. She saw his efforts, his quiet commitment to his newfound empathy. He didn't just talk, he acted. He showed up at Nia's school play, a silent, supportive figure in the back. He helped her volunteer at local shelters, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as an ordinary man lending a hand. Months later, Ara stood in a bustling new community arts center, designed and funded by Thor Industries' new philanthropic division. Her vibrant graphic designs adorned the walls, marketing the center's programs, bringing life and color to the space. She was thriving, her creativity unleashed, her confidence soaring. She was no longer just an administrative assistant. She was the lead designer for the arts outreach program, her dreams finally taking tangible form. Ethan, now a frequent, welcome presence in her life, watched her from across the room, a profound sense of peace on his face. He remembered the cold rain, the threadbare coat, the desperate search for a kind heart. He remembered the searing pain of Ara's betrayal, the guilt that had almost consumed him, and he remembered the slow, painstaking journey back to trust, to connection, to love. The optional twist, the final layer, was a quiet, personal realization Ara had made herself, one she never fully vocalized to Ethan, but held close to her heart. She had always felt a strange familiarity with him, even as a homeless man. She recalled the subtle scent of expensive aftershave, the too eloquent words, the knowing gaze in his eyes. She hadn't consciously pieced it together, but deep down a tiny part of her had always suspected he wasn't who he seemed. Yet she had chosen kindness anyway. She had offered compassion, not because she believed he was truly destitute, but because it was simply who she was. Her kindness wasn't a transaction. It was an inherent part of her being, a truth he had desperately sought, and she had given freely, even when a part of her wondered. The realization settled over her, a quiet affirmation. She hadn't been foolish. She had been genuine. And it was that genuine spirit, that unwavering capacity for human connection, that had ultimately changed both their lives. She walked over to Ethan, her hand gently touching his arm. He turned, his eyes warm, reflecting a depth of emotion she had only ever seen in him since that dramatic reveal. "Ethan," she said, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Thank you." He smiled back, a genuine, unburdened smile that made her heart ache with happiness. "Thank you, Ara," he replied, his voice a low, intimate rumble, "for everything." He had started his journey as a CEO testing humanity, searching for a single spark of genuine kindness. He had found it in a rain-soaked sandwich offered by a struggling girl who saw beyond his disguise. And in that act of kindness, he found not just a partner for his philanthropic vision, but a partner for life, a profound love born from an unlikely, humbling encounter. He had dressed as a homeless man, and in doing so, he had found his true home in the heart of the only girl who had dared to help. His vast wealth had once felt empty, but now, filled with Ara's love and the shared purpose of helping others, it felt boundless, truly meaningful. The city lights twinkled outside, no longer a symbol of cold ambition, but a canvas of infinite possibilities. Their story, forged in disguise and redeemed by empathy, whispered a timeless truth. Sometimes the greatest riches aren't found in what you have, but in the unconditional kindness you give and the unexpected love you find when you least expect it.